Just now, Zhang Yi found it difficult to provide evidence to Bian Junwu after all. What Zhang Yi had said so far was just speculation. So, he had to rely on his eloquence to try and convince Bian Junwu. From the beginning, Zhang Yi believed that such a simple logic couldn't be lost on Bian Junwu. However, just as Zhang Yi was still thinking about how to persuade his ally, Bian Junwu unexpectedly praised him. Actually, Bian Junwu had always appreciated Zhang Yi's cautious character. This was why he had wanted to test him and see if he could provide any key evidence. But when Zhang Yi couldn't explain things clearly, Bian Junwu decided to drop the act. He directly stated that there was no need to worry because the events related to the Bai Shui cult were merely small skirmishes for Jiangnan region. If things really escalated, Jiangnan region could easily suppress them. Zhang Yi didn't have much to say after that. He had already done everything he could. At the very least, he planted a seed of doubt in Bian Junwu's mind. Zhang Yi then half-jokingly said, "If things turn out the way I expect, you won't just abandon us, right?" At this point, Bian Junwu reassured Zhang Yi, admitting that as long as anything happens within the jurisdiction of Jiangnan with a high enough threat level, they would definitely intervene. Of course, if Zhang Yi still had concerns, he was welcome to return with them to Jiangnan region anytime. Zhang Yi quickly waved his hand and replied, "Thank you for the invitation, Captain Bian. If I make up my mind one day, I'll contact you immediately. But for now, I have to take my team back. They're really exhausted." Seeing this, Bian Junwu didn't insist. He simply offered to see Zhang Yi off, and Zhang Yi didn't refuse. As Bian Junwu followed Zhang Yi to his squad's base, they exchanged a few words before Zhang Yi prepared to drive away. Just then, Li Jian suddenly came running from a distance. Zhang Yi was puzzled by his appearance, wondering what he was doing. Li Jian grabbed Zhang Yi's hand and anxiously asked, "Have you seen my son? He suddenly disappeared a few days ago." Before Zhang Yi could reply, Li Jian turned and left on his own. However, a careful observer might notice that Zhang Yi had slipped his hand into his pocket, as Li Jian had passed something to him during the handshake. Although this brief incident occurred, Bian Junwu didn't pay much attention to it, as he had heard about Li Jian's child. After bidding Zhang Yi farewell, Bian Junwu remained deep in thought, knowing that it wasn't time for him to leave yet. There were still a few things he needed to investigate before he could give Jiangnan region a satisfactory answer. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi gazed at the battlefield outside the window, his mind full of complicated emotions. At this moment, he wished he would never have to return to this troubled place again. But things rarely go as one wishes. Zhang Yi then took out the item Li Jian had given him earlier, a piece of white cloth covered in dense writing. The text detailed all of Li Jian's activities after joining the Bai Shui cult, along with the major secrets of various locations within the cult. After reading it, Zhang Yi's heart sank because he finally pieced together the entire situation. Li Jian's top-secret information provided Zhang Yi with the crucial evidence he needed for his suspicions. Now, Zhang Yi was certain that the Bai Shui cult was deeply involved in the event's zombie. At that moment, Zhou Kr noticed Zhang Yi's unusual behavior and curiously asked what he was holding. Zhang Yi quickly put the cloth away, knowing it wasn't time to tell them about it yet. There were still too many doubts that needed careful consideration. So, Zhang Yi smiled faintly and said, "Nothing, it's just some old undergarment I changed out of." Hearing this, Zhou Kr blushed, while Xu Chunlei burst out laughing. But what they didn't know was that Zhang Yi was already hatching a massive plot. Zhang Yi finally returned safely to his doomsday fortress. Just as everyone thought the zombie crisis was over, only Zhang Yi knew that an even greater danger was quietly approaching. Earlier, on the other side, Yang Xinxin had been quietly watching by the window since receiving the news that Zhang Yi was coming back. At the same time, Yang Sha had prepared a lavish dinner. Seeing Xinxin staring out the window for hours, Sha warmly said, "Your brother and the others will be back soon, don't worry." However, Xinxin sighed quietly because he felt that Zhang Yi and the others were risking their lives to protect them, while he was enjoying a peaceful life in the shelter without being able to help. Feeling a bit dejected, Xinxin remained by the window. At that moment, Zhang Yi's convoy finally appeared within Xinxin's line of sight. Overjoyed, she shouted, "Brother, they're back." Upon hearing this, the shelter erupted in excitement as everyone rushed to the entrance to greet them. As the gate creaked open, Zhang Yi and his team made a grand entrance, immediately met by the girls who had stayed behind, eagerly asking if they were okay. One of them said, "Brother, you're all back." Xinxin was worried sick. Nearby, Lu Karen wore a troubled expression. She too had wanted to help Zhang Yi fight the zombies but didn't have any special abilities, so he had no choice but to stay home. Zhang Yi, however, easily saw through the thoughts of the two girls. He gently patted their heads and comforted them, saying, "Why do you both look so worried? Haven't you managed the shelter really well? We all have different roles to play, and with me here, there's no need for you to step in." Look at these muscles. Protecting you both is more than enough. This playful gesture lifted their spirits. Just then, Yang Sha approached with the food and said, Shinshin, let them clean up first. We'll start dinner shortly. Whatever you want to say, let's discuss it at the table. And so, a grand welcoming feast began. Although they had only been gone for about 10 days, returning still felt surreal. Everyone happily raised their glasses, and in that moment, the tension they had been carrying for days finally eased. Zhang Yi then asked about the recent events at the shelter, wanting to know if anything unusual had happened while he was away. Yang Sha shook her head, saying that nothing had happened and that the quiet around the shelter was almost eerie. Zhang Yi felt relieved, as his biggest concern was the possibility of strange occurrences. Lu Karen, curious, asked about their experiences over the past few days, a question that also lingered in the minds of all the girls who had stayed behind. After all, girls love to gossip. Zhang Yi then vividly recounted the events at the camp, leaving the girls at home in awe. They learned that less than 1% of the people in Tianhai had survived, but fortunately, Zhang Yi and his team successfully quelled the zombie tide, making them feel both shocked and grateful. Lu Karen was deeply moved, feeling fortunate that they might be the last surviving humans. Just then, Xu Chunlei, uncharacteristically, urged them to cheer up, saying, Come on, let's have a drink. Live in the moment, why dwell on sad things? The fact that we're still alive is the best outcome. His words lightened the mood, and soon everyone was in high spirits again. Afterward, Zhang Yi looked toward Yang Sha and asked if she had continued making the special food over the past few days. Zhang Yi considered these foods to be strategic resources and wanted to stockpile them to ensure they wouldn't run out at a critical moment. Yang Sha smiled and said she had been making them every day, storing everything in the fridge. However, she had discovered that after 7 days, the food's effects would diminish, and after about 10 days, they would completely lose their powers and become ordinary food. Zhang Yi took note of this important detail. As the banquet drew to a close, Xu Chunlei made a mad dash to the bathroom. He had downed 10 bottles of wine by himself, a testament to his drinking capacity. Liang Yu quipped that he probably had a fear of missing out, considering how nerve-wracking life had been on the battlefield. Zhang Yi chuckled but didn't dwell on it. He then stood up and said to Shinshin, I'm heading to the control room. Once you're done eating, come find me there. Earlier, after Zhang Yi arrived at the control room, he began working away. Even though the control panel was as complicated as that of a starship, it was no match for someone as experienced as Zhang Yi. Soon after, young Shinshin came in. Smart as she was, she immediately locked the door because he sensed from Zhang Yi's few words that there were things Zhang Yi didn't want others to know yet. Zhang Yi wasn't trying to keep secrets on purpose, he just wanted to figure things out on his own first before selectively sharing the information with others. Too many people would only disrupt his thinking. Pointing to the computer screen, Zhang Yi said, Shinshin, take a look at these files first. The information here is about the leaders and deputies of the various factions. As they went through the files, they learned that Yuan Kong was a mixed-race child. Her father was named Yuan Suiyu, and her mother was called Jiamizi. Both had been devoted followers of the Shenli Church in Japan. After going through all the information, Yang Shinshin asked curiously, Brother, why are you showing me this? Zhang Yi didn't hide his thoughts from Yang Shinshin. He explained all the recent events in detail and shared his suspicions that the Bai Shui sect might be closely linked to the recent wave of disappearances. Yang Shinshin was shocked by this idea. Although she wasn't one to believe in conspiracy theories, if Zhang Yi's suspicions were correct, the mastermind behind it all must be a top-tier schemer. Yang Shinshin, unusually serious, began to review all the information on Yuan Kong and the Shenli sect. What she discovered was astonishing. Yuan Kong had come to Tianhai City with her parents when she was just 3 years old. They lived at 256 Jinling Street in the Chang'an district. That same year, her parents established a branch of the Shenli Church in Tianhai, with Yuan Suiyan as the head and Jiamizi as the high priestess. The Shenli Church was classified as a cult in China and operated underground. To attract followers, Yuan Suiyan and Jiamizi intentionally portrayed Yuan Kong as a girl with divine powers, even declaring her a saint within the church. Using these manipulative tactics, they quickly amassed wealth from countless families. However, disaster struck when Yuan Kong's parents died in a plane crash. As a young child, Yuan Kong was powerless to control the church, and soon, the truth about her lack of divine powers was exposed. The enraged followers began to cruelly mistreat the helpless girl. This scandal shocked the region, involving 166 people. Yuan Kong then vanished without a trace, only to reappear years later as the leader of the Bai Shui sect during the Ice Age. Using the same manipulative techniques she had learned, she quickly expanded her influence. Reading this, both Zhang Yi and Yang Shinshin fell into silence, struggling to comprehend the horrors Yuan Kong had endured. After a long pause, Zhang Yi finally spoke. Can you believe someone like her could become a savior in the apocalypse? Who would believe it? Yang Xinxin sighed. The fact that she's still sane is a miracle. If it were me, I'd only be thinking of destroying the world or reshaping it into something I want. With this, Zhang Yi connected all the dots. He had previously thought that the Bai Shui sect was the organization that suffered the most, but now he saw things differently. Perhaps Yuan Kong didn't care about the lives of her followers at all. Maybe she was deliberately using their deaths to cover up her own schemes. Yang Xinxin, surprised, asked, Brother, do you have any evidence for this? Zhang Yi smiled faintly. I didn't have solid evidence before, but now things are different. Then, he added calmly, do you remember Yuan Kong's ability? It shouldn't be called blessing. It should be called death's return. Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin analyze Yuan Kong's ambition. Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin analyzed Yuan Kong's ambition and concluded that if she were allowed to continue her current path, the entire world might fall under her control. Zhang Yi recalled seeing Yuan Kong use her abilities during the zombie battle. At that time, she displayed 4 different abilities, which struck him as odd, but he hadn't had time to investigate further. Now it seemed his instincts were correct. If those abilities were all her own, there would have been no reason to hide them until the battle with the zombie king. Thus, Zhang Yi concluded that those mysterious abilities came from the people who consumed the ice crystal and died, transferring their powers to her. Yang Xinxin's expression grew serious. If that's true, how strong must Yuan Kong be? After all, everyone's abilities have some weaknesses, but if someone has multiple powers, they could cover those weaknesses and become invincible. You're exactly right. That's why she desires continuous conflict in Tianhai City. As long as those who obtain the ice crystal are alive, they are of no use to her. Only when they die do their powers return to her body, Zhang Yi replied. Zhang Yi's gaze turned sharper. This wave of disappearances might not just be targeting us but also her own followers. This could explain why so many Bai Shui sect members have died. Yang Xinxin waved his hand. Brother, although your analysis sounds reasonable, you don't have solid evidence to prove it. You won't be able to convince the investigation team with mere words. Zhang Yi's eyes grew cold, knowing the urgency of the situation. If they continued to act like ostriches with their heads in the sand, it wouldn't be long before Yuan Kong completely overpowered them. The recent wave of zombie had already weakened the fighting strength of the 4 families significantly, and the ice crystal left behind was a clear signal that Yuan Kong would soon begin harvesting power. The investigation team was the only thing deterring her. If they left, the Bai Shui sect would definitely take action. Zhang Yi then took out a piece of white cloth from his pocket, saying that it could serve as evidence. Yang Xinxin curiously accepted it but asked, What is this? Zhang Yi sighed. This was given to me by Li Jian. His son died, and if not for that, he would never have risked telling me the secret. Yang Xinxin carefully examined the contents of the cloth, growing more and more alarmed. It contained many hidden secrets of the Bai Shui sect. The use of bloodvine to create zombies, boys being castrated by Yuan Kong for evolution, and Yuan Kong personally killing a pregnant woman, among other horrors. The final page was a blood-written plea for revenge, expressing Li Jian's wish for Zhang Yi to avenge his son since he lacked the power to do so himself. Yang Xinxin finally understood why Zhang Yi was so certain. Based on the information they had, he had already deduced why Yuan Kong was doing all this. Zhang Yi's eyes filled with apprehension. If not for Zhongdin's investigation team, they would never have discovered the secret. Given Yuan Kong's abilities, once she made it through her development phase, it wouldn't be long before she took control of all China, if not the entire world, and no one would be able to stop her. Yang Xinxin sighed. It's a pity that she manipulates her followers, making them willing to die for her. They're all being used. But Zhang Yi had no time to pity them. His priority was figuring out how to deal with this threat. The longer they delayed, the slimmer their chances of success. However, it was unrealistic for Zhang Yi to solve this problem alone. He needed to alert all the organizations in Tianhai City to Yuan Kong's conspiracy and, more importantly, secure the support of the Central District. After all, with only a few ragtag survivors left in Tianhai, even if they joined forces, they might not be a match for Yuan Kong. Zhang Yi's biggest concern was Zhongdin. Even if Yuan Kong manipulated everyone, what did that have to do with the Central District? As the strongest force in the Zhongdin region, Blizzard City only needed to maintain relative stability, not act as an arbiter of justice. They might even try to recruit Yuan Kong. Realizing this, Zhang Yi's mind raced. If the Central District could recruit him, they could also recruit Yuan Kong. If that happened, they would be completely doomed. Genius hacker girl. No wonder Yang Xinxin is Zhang Yi's most brilliant strategist. With just one sentence, she enlightened Zhang Yi. Seeing Zhang Yi in a difficult situation, Yang Xinxin immediately proposed her idea. saying, as the saying goes, flies don't land on a seamless egg. As long as the benefits are sufficient, the Jiangnan district will naturally cooperate with us. Then, Yang Xinqin calmly asked, Zhang Yi, do you know what Jiangnan district fears the most? Zhang Yi blurted out, of course, it's someone threatening their dominance. Yang Xinqin smiled knowingly, then let's make Jiangnan district aware of who caused the zombie outbreak in Tianhai City. Zhang Yi scratched his head helplessly, thinking, I want to, but there's no concrete evidence. Besides, we've already taken the bloodvine branches and had Kair test them, but no zombie virus was found. Yang Xinqin reminded Zhang Yi, it doesn't matter if we don't have evidence. As long as we make Jiangnan district suspicious of the Bai Shui sect's Xuankang Yi, suspended leaf, it's enough. Yang Xinqin continued, as long as Jiangnan district starts doubting Yuan Kong, they'll send people to investigate him. If he resists, it means there's a problem. If he complies, the problem will eventually be uncovered. Zhang Yi pondered for a moment and said, so, you mean we should exaggerate the threat posed by Yuan Kong, forcing Jiangnan district to step in and investigate him? Yang Xinqin smiled slightly, you're really sharp, Zhang Yi. Exactly. And if you let the military know how much power Yuan Kong has, how could Jiangnan district not be interested? Zhang Yi finally realized, yes, if Yuan Kong attracts enough attention from Jiangnan district, they'll probably arrest him for research, ensuring Tianhai City's safety. It's a good idea, Zhang Yi thought, but I should plan carefully. Acting impulsively could be too risky. At this moment, while controlling the computer, Yang Xinqin said, Zhang Yi, there's another important figure in the Bai Shui sect we haven't looked into yet. She pulled up the information on the screen and asked, is Zheng Yixian important? Since our first contact with the Bai Shui sect, he's been like Yuan Kong's puppet, handling all their affairs. First, we need to determine whether the zombie crisis was solely Yuan Kong's doing or if the whole Bai Shui sect is involved. If it's just Yuan Kong, we might be able to turn the Bai Shui sect's leader against him. If it's the latter, Yang Xinqin's tone grew heavy, we'll be up against an extremely sinister and well-connected cult. Zhang Yi began to think. During the zombie battle, most of the Bai Shui sect's members died, and many practitioners were also sacrificed. If the Bai Shui sect members knew the truth about the zombie crisis, they could all win Oscars for their acting. Zhang Yi concluded that only a few within the Bai Shui sect were aware of this. Yang Xinqin stared at Zheng Yixian's information on the screen and said, maybe the answer lies here. Zhang Yi focused on the screen, realizing that Zheng Yixian had been Yuan Kong's neighbor since he was 8 years old. When Yuan Kong disappeared, Zheng Yixian also left Tianhai City. Zhang Yi stroked his chin and thought, then Zheng Yixian must know all of Yuan Kong's plans, or perhaps the zombie crisis was something they both planned together. The Bai Shui sect members were just pawns in Yuan Kong's scheme. As Zhang Yi thought more deeply, he became increasingly alarmed. Just how many practitioners has Yuan Kong absorbed? He must be terrifyingly powerful now. After careful consideration, Zhang Yi decided to think things through carefully. If he betrayed Yuan Kong, how could he avoid being hunted down by the Bai Shui sect?